on earth are we? Why in heaven are we here? And how to make sense of this mess of our humanness and perhaps even transcend it. Welcome, everyone. From whatever nation state or emotional state you might be in, Dawn of an Era of Well-Being is the place to tune in. We're going to deep dive into uplift with insight, and I'm thrilled to welcome our two formidable hosts. Two-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, Professor Ervin Laszlo, is a world-renowned philosopher and systems scientist, the author, co-author, or editor of 101 books that have appeared in a total of 23 languages. He has also written several hundred papers and articles in scientific journals and popular magazines. He's a member of numerous scientific bodies, including the International Academy of Science, the World Academy of Arts and Science, and he's the founder of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research and the Club of Budapest, and the recipient of various honors and awards such as Goya Peace Prize, the Assisi Mandirov Peace Prize, the Luxembourg Peace Prize, and he's received honorary PhDs from the United States, Canada, France, Finland, and Hungary. And Fred Saal, a business leader, futurist, practitioner of Eastern wisdom and Western science, author and chairman of the Family Business Network's Ambassador Circle, and founder of ITEA Institute and Octave Institute, where ancient wisdom and quantum science are fused to create a platform for people to achieve a purposeful life that's mindfully lived at new levels of consciousness and freedom. I'd like to start each episode by acknowledging our worldwide audience, for whom some are lucky enough to be thriving in this remarkable new environment, but many are not. It's challenging. Dawn of an Era of Well-Being podcast and book hopes to offer real comfort to the global community, helping us awaken to a new paradigm, a new era of well-being. We encourage you to not only read the book and hear the podcast, but to feel them, to start awakening your senses to different ways of perceiving beyond just our eyes and just our ears, because this is the space that Ervin and Fred refer to as consciousness. That's our comfort zone for the long term. So, before I introduce today's wonderful guest, Michael Bernard Beckwith, I have this question for you, Ervin. How to discern and distinguish between the clever voice of ego and the subtle voice of guidance and consciousness, and why is guidance more subtle if it's so much more important? Ervin.
Well, guidance comes to us through our consciousness, through probably I would call it non-ordinary states of consciousness. The consciousness that occurs in the area where Michael Beckwith is working, because it occurs in spirituality, in religion in the broadest sense. So the guidance we get is from these deep layers. We have to explore those layers. But it's not from the everyday world around us. It's not just telling us how to make a better pie, or something along those lines. It's really, it comes to us from the cosmos itself, from a divine source. And these are the kind of things that I'd like to talk with Michael Beckwith about, who is a leader in this field. I would just say, in answer to your question, Alison, the guidance comes to us from a subtle source, from a deep source, a source that's universal, available to everybody, but how to access it and how to make use of it so that we live on this earth and thrive on this earth instead of harming each other and harming nature. That's the big question. And here is where I think our guest today will have an important contribution to make.
Absolutely true. And on that dynamic note, let me introduce our very special guest, Michael Bernard Beckwith. He's the founder and spiritual director of the Agape International Spiritual Center, a trans-denominational community headquartered in Los Angeles, comprised of thousands of local members and global live streamers. Widely recognized for his teachings on the science of inner transformation, Dr. Beckwith embraces a practical approach to spirituality utilizing meditation, affirmative prayer, and life visioning. These practices teach us to take the experience of inner peace and awakened awareness into our everyday lives As co-founder and president of the Association for Global New Thought, he hosts conferences featuring harbingers of world peace, and his new app, Beckwith Inspires, features essential spiritual tools, technologies, and practices to help shift perceptions and transform lives. And oh, do we need some transformation here, Michael Beckwith. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us. And I'm gonna dive into a question that I think you'd be so equipped to answer. While we're still in our infancy of becoming a hopefully more consciousness-oriented species and cultivating the relationship to this new paradigm, who is parenting our mind? And let me give you a familiar scenario. I think this has happened to many people. This happened to me recently. Me and my monkey mind, as we'll call it, are both hungry, but with different appetites. My tasty dessert is literally sitting on my plate while monkey mind overeats with thoughts. By the time it's digested its meal, I cannot find mine. My chocolate cake is gone, and I don't remember eating it. I was so consumed by my thoughts, which consumed my food without my even realizing it, and I wound up hungry, frustrated, and deprived before my very hungry eyes. So how on earth can an innate human hunger for tasty pleasure be usurped by something that's not even real, our runaway minds? Food for thought?
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to appreciate the opportunity to be with you and to be with Ervin. It's magnificent. And I'll just kind of continue where Ervin left off and continue with that conversation. Because first, I want to jump into the guidance question a little bit. Because as he's saying, it's coming. Guidance does not come from this world. You know, we're bombarded. There's a broadcast of wisdom, guidance, love, intelligence, beauty that's happening perennially. And what we're seeking to do through spiritual practice and intentionality is to be available to that guidance, which means we have to be interested. Without interest, then, as you're indicating, the monkey mind gets pulled into the fray of the human experience. And so individuals become interested two ways, either through crisis or through insight. And so humanity generally, most of humanity grows through crisis and pain, and then open themselves up to become interested into something higher. So we're surrounded by guidance and wisdom. Inspiration is a direct word of God, directly moving through us. When we're inspired, we've transcended the personal mind, and we're hearing something differently. As you've just said, not with ears, not seeing with eyes, but seeing with pure consciousness. So the monkey mind is something that everyone has to deal with. It's a thinkingness. Thinkingness is happening. And so what happens is with spiritual practice, instead of trying to get rid of the monkey mind, what we seek to do is become aware of it. We just look at it. We watch it. And as the scientists would tell us, there's something called the observer effect. Anything you observe changes on a subatomic level based on your observation. So if you have observation with intention, I intend to wake up. I intend to embrace the next great version of myself. I intend to participate in my own evolution, my own unfolding. If I have an intention combined with observation, then I can look at the monkey mind, and by virtue of my observation, it starts to transmute on a subatomic level. I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm just watching it. And then it starts to lose its power. And then what's left? What's left is me as the observer that has a choice. Choice is a function of expanded consciousness. So as I'm doing my work, I'm now living from choice. So I can choose. When we get to a place of freedom, you come to a fork in the road, and there's two choices. There's pleasure and there's bliss. Most people go to pleasure, but pleasure is short-lived. It's empty calories. I'm not downing pleasure. Pleasure is a good thing. But when you constantly choose pleasure over bliss, bliss is a function of the activation of your potential. When you start to really activate potential, you go into bliss states. Pleasure, you have its opposite, which is anxiety. If you have excitement, then you have depression. So pleasure is still in the realm of duality. But bliss doesn't have an opposite. Bliss is your innate being. So going back to your question, The monkey mind is definitely there. Thinking this is there. But through intentional observation, we can transmute those thought forms and then ultimately transcend them.
Well, that's what you've got to learn.
It takes practice.
That's what, Michael, you have to teach, and you are teaching it. How really to move into that level, to that conscious level, where we can transcend the everyday mind, the everyday preoccupations. So entering on this, I'm reminded of the saying of an observation by William James, who wrote this book on the nature of religious experience. He said, the religious experience is typical, the feeling that we are, or the insight that we are part of something larger, something more than we are. Now, you can impart this feeling in people. How you do it, and how can we make use of this capacity that you are showing to have people become more spiritual? Because when they become more spiritual, they become the change or the guidance that they wish to have in the world. Then they exemplify it. The how is now a very important question. We know that's becoming more spiritual, that's becoming more insightful, inspired. How? We look to you for guidance on that, Michael.
It's interesting that, we're dealing in a realm in which the how-tos are subtle. But the beginning of that kind of awakening is, I would say that humanity is suffering from an identity crisis. And they actually believe that the content that's passing through the awareness is their identity. That's like the ocean thinking that the boats or the plankton or the fish or the pollution is the ocean's identity. It's not. It's content. It's not the ocean. And so individuals actually think they are the interpretation of their past experiences. They are where they were born. They are their bodies. And that's all content. So when we stop and actually learn to be in enjoyment without anticipating anything in the future. See, enjoyment in the moment is a remedy for anticipation, and it begins to sever you from the content identity, and you start to become aware that you are awareness itself. So the how-to is ageless. It's ancient wisdom. The how-to is meditation. The how-to is sincere prayer. The two greatest technologies on the planet are sincerity and earnestness. Sincerity says, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to study, I'm going to pray. I'm sincere about my desire to awaken. Earnestness says, I'm going to do a little something every day, even if I don't feel like it. So if you combine sincerity and earnestness, then you have these epiphanies, you have these moments, and they may only last a couple of seconds, but you have moments where you're severed from time, you're severed from seeing yourself based on the content passing through, and that's the beginning stage of awakening. When I see that I'm not my content, I'm waking up now, you see? And then when I can just stabilize a feeling, not an emotion, but a feeling of being in joy without looking to the future for something to happen, now that's another stage of awakening. And then we learn through practice to stabilize these states. And if you stabilize a state, then the next stage emerges. A next stage cannot emerge from a discordant state. And so all the work we're doing in consciousness is to stabilize a state. So we can stay in a state longer and longer periods of time. And then the next stage emerges like a butterfly from a caterpillar. There's a stage that happens. When there's a state, when that caterpillar goes through a state of dissolution and then pure stillness, there's nothing there, then the next stage emerges. When we are able to just have a modicum of holding a state for no reason, then the next stage will occur. And I'll say this, in that moment of joy with no anticipation of the future, we also are learning to be in joy or peace or love without attaching it to a condition outside of ourselves. In other words, we can use conditions to say, oh, this makes me happy. It's my anniversary. Somebody gave me a gift. But then we take that feeling of happiness, sever it from the condition, and learn to just stay in it for no reason. That's another state of awakening. And if we stabilize these states, then there's a natural stage that begins to unfold. And it's like we start to know ourselves and see ourselves for the very first time. And right now, humanity, is suffering from a nightmare pill. And it has swallowed a pill saying that all of the negativity is really reality, but it's not. It's a simulation of thought forms being manifesting as experience. But when we come to these other states and stabilize it, we wake out of it. Woo! We become clear and clean. It's a whole different space. And I just want to say one other thing. No one needs to be a superhero to do this. I'm telling you, with earnestness and sincerity, little by little by little, we break free from the matrix.
That's so inspiring. That actually makes me think of something that you had said recently, Ervin, which was also almost reassuring. It's not that we don't encourage people to wake up, to start to explore this other realm, but you said that it's not even necessary that everybody wake up, nor wake up at the same time, nor in the same way. So there's a lot of latitude, isn't there?
Well,
Ervin?
I mean, it would be practically impossible to have nearly 8 billion people wake up to this higher state, enter the stage, move past the current state. But that's why we talk about a critical mass. And that's why we talk about communication and contact and the spread of consciousness, the connection between consciousnesses. I think if there's a critical mass of people here and there, in Los Angeles, in Italy, in China, wherever, in India, wherever they happen, if they achieve that higher level, a new stage, as you say, the higher level of awareness, I think they'll be able to communicate with each other. They'll be able to feel each other. It doesn't have to be kind of articulate communication in words, but they will start feeling how the other is doing. I have a good fortune to be treated by alternative medical healers who actually feel my condition. They can tell what is happening to my body by spontaneous insight. They use a dowsing method, but there are various methods to be able to do this. But it's possible, and I can assure you that it is possible. Communication and consciousness are non-local events. They are not limited to the here and now. And if this would happen, if there would be these nuclei of higher stage awarenesses arising, then I think the communication among them would spread and would infect, to use this current word, infect others, but with a new consciousness, with a new stage of being. And I think we have got to start the process. It's not a hopeless task. That's why Alison is emphasizing. We don't have to be able to attain 8 billion people at the same time. We have to be able to attain a critical mass, thought leaders, informational people who can move things. Michael Beckwith says there aren't many, but those that are have to come together and have to create the nuclei for a new civilization. I think so. The how to come back to this question again, is important because it's feasible. You're not talking about utopia, idealism. We are talking about that can be done, moreover, something that must be done in our own interest. So here is a learning experience, and we can benefit from Michael's presence here to be taught how to proceed with this experience.
Absolutely. And Michael, just off the heels of Ervin's point here, because are we at risk? I don't like to emphasize the negative, but I like to use the concerns to balance out the positive trajectory that we're going on. are we at risk of overwhelming our young and vulnerable senses with things like Facebook's metaverse and all the AI explosion that's going on right now? Because the world is much more technologically savvy, but also dependent and susceptible to its influences, for better or worse. So is there a concern that we'll further confuse consciousness with ego in a kind of wormhole of mixed realities? And people like you can help us navigate that, but what's your thought on that?
Well, historically, technology has always superseded consciousness. With the nuclear weapons, with mobile phones, television, we've always gone beyond what the average individual state of consciousness is, and so we're doing it again. With all of these technologies. So so all those technologies, particularly the ones we're coming into now, the metaverse, they're actually representing what's within us. They're actually prosthetics of what's within us. A computer is a prosthetic brain, but our brain is way more dominant than a computer. And so it behooves us to actually catch up with the technology. The technology is like saying, these are prosthetics of what's within us. Now we have to catch up and actually allow for the technology to be useful to technology and useful to feeding all of the people on the planet, bringing clean water, creating an economic system that's not immature, but mature enough to be built upon abundance rather than on debt. So there has to be a shift of consciousness so that we overtake our own technology. And so, as Ervin was saying, it's not going to happen overnight, nor is it going to everybody's not going to happen at the same time. It's like popcorn. You pop popcorn, all the little kernels don't pop at the same time. One pops, another pops, and then pretty soon they're all popping. And there's always a couple that don't pop, And that kind of communication he's talking about, that kind of communication worldwide happens through communion. Communication via communion. We're in communion with the same thing. The same presence, the same source, the same power becomes more real to us than the very chairs we're sitting on. And then we're in communion with the people around the world. And suddenly these ideas that are in the idea sphere, inspiration, guidance, starts to flow through the critical mass as he's talking about. That the beautiful thing about ageless wisdom is that it tells us that a thought that emerges from a field of unity is way more powerful than a thought form emerging from a field of separation. They don't have the same gain. They don't have the same function. They don't have the same amplitude. So if you have even a small group of people, but a powerful group of people that pass a critical mass, that's way more powerful than the rest of the population that's unconscious. And it will start to create a wake for people to follow through. And I think we're really on the verge of a Renaissance movement in which things will happen very, very rapidly because the universe is progressive. And when you get locked in stagnation, dictatorships, stagnation, and greed, materialism, consumerism, war implements, et cetera, then what happens is it creates kind of like a slingshot. Something's being pulled back because something's not moving, and then it's released because it can't stand the tension anymore, and then society moves really fast, really quickly. However, it moves, first of all, through the people who've been doing the spiritual work, those who can hold the wattage of the cosmos and not blow their circuits because they have prepared themselves for the onslaught of the cosmic energy. So I know that's a lot in there, but it is dangerous what we're doing with technology. So we have to quicken so that we get ahead of it, because it's just replicating what's within us anyway. People need to be reminded about that what they see outside of themselves, this computer, what they see outside of this metaverse, that's all within us. You see, it's not foreign, it's within us. But we are assigning too much power out there. And we need to come back and assign the power.
The authority
we have to mature.
And not above us, not beyond us. What is so remarkable in today's situation is that for the first time, two things are happening simultaneously. We are becoming threatened as a species, as a whole species on this earth. The physical conditions for our existence are no longer guaranteed. If you move like this, ever smaller groups of people could survive, ever fewer could actually thrive on this earth. The conditions would narrow and the crisis would grow. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, the awareness of the need to create conditions for our survival, even I like to use the word thrival, ability to thrive, that these are becoming known. We are finally waking up as an international community for the first time, getting together and spelling out goals for everybody. Goals to which some nations who are able or affluent enough are pledging to support, are making pledges. These pledges are obviously, for the time being, they are well-intentioned, but very often the financial means, the actual political will is missing to live up to it. And they're also not all sufficiently strong, sufficiently radical to move it. But obviously, we are in a situation where consciousness becomes the key. Financing, yes. Technology, yes. All of those things. Political will, yes. But how do we do this unless we start feeling it, feeling one, feeling part of it, and feeling that what we want to do is what everybody wants to do, because everybody wants to live as a normal human capacity. And we realize that we live when everybody else lives. When in our book, when we talk about well-being, we have a well-being when the world around us achieves well-being. These are not separate individual elements. They're the whole or nothing, all of us together. So we are in this particular historical moment, and we are waking up. The international community is out there now, talking about the G20, talk about the COP26, talk about the Paris Accord or whatever. All these are unprecedented elements of awakening in a practical sense as well. Not yet in actual practice, but envisaging the practice. And the key to this, to moving into real practice, is what Michael is doing and what great intellectual and spiritual, inspiring people are doing, getting people to understand the situation, to feel it, and to want it, not as an imposition, not as a responsibility, but as a positive aspect. Here we are, finally, we can come together as a species, create our consciousness, which is held in common by all of us. If we can do that, then we really will create the new man, the new person, I would say, that Marx was even talking about, and that philosophers and prophets were talking about all along, the new person, And this is almost here. We have to accentuate it, otherwise the crisis will overtake us. So here are the tipping point, and things like what we are trying to do, the things like we are engaged in doing at the Institute, with this program, with our publications, and with Michael, with his initiative in Los Angeles and worldwide. These are the key elements to make sure that we are succeeding, that we are moving toward thriving and not toward extinction.
We're the first generation that can actually destroy the earth and film it at the same time. But I'm in absolute agreement. We're at a point, since humanity has a tendency to grow through crisis anyway. Not every single being. Many people grow through inspiration and insight, revelation, articulate a vision and walk in that direction. But still, most people still grow through crisis. And so the crisis that we're in I believe it's of an evolutionary crisis that is going to catapult us to the next level of planetary concern, international concern, and not just me, my concern. Not even me, my country, but a more of a global perspective. And that crisis is pushing us in that direction. And we know, as you're saying, we know right now that with the right use of technology, we know right now we have everything necessary to birth a kind and just global society in which everyone has enough water and everyone has enough food and shelter. That already exists. But as you're saying, Ervin, there has to be the will and the willingness to walk in that direction. As you're saying, we're seeing remnants of that beginning to come up now. I mean, obviously we've had the United Nations for a number of years, but it's done some things. But now you're starting to see more countries buy into certain things and make agreements. And that needs to be expedited because people are now just getting to the point of realizing that without trees, we're dead. If we kill off the rainforest, we're out of here. Without bees, the human beings won't be on the planet. People are starting to understand what we have done as a species to destroy Mother Nature. And because of this understanding, there is some movement afoot. And as you're saying, and I agree, this begins in consciousness. With the consciousness piece adds one other thing, and that is it allows something to come into manifestation out of nothing, with no previous condition. You don't have to have an external condition. When consciousness hits a certain point, then something can show up out of consciousness that didn't exist before. And people will call that a miracle. They won't know what to call it. But if we have enough people in communion about the possibility and articulating a vision, something can come onto the scene that didn't exist before. And that's like a universal plus factor, you see. That I've seen operate on a personal level with people, and community level with people, but it needs to operate on a global scale.
I love that. I love what you're saying, Michael. And what I suddenly think of is that this is such a tipping point. There's it seems a deep need for relief because people are feeling something one way or the other everywhere on earth. And there's a great desire for relief from this incredible discomfort and upheaval. Question in my mind is, will people, and I could understand this in a sense, want to veer back towards the old way for a sense of immediate relief because we're not even adept at holding ourselves in a state of discomfort? So how can we, as Ervin has been saying, and it's so important, how can we make finding a new kind of relief fun, enticing, enjoyment, exciting? And I think you have certainly answers for that. I think you're doing it, but please share that with us.
Yeah, you're speaking about the fact, first of all, that people are addicted to the toxic chemicals that flow through the body temple when they're bombarded with bad news. It's an addiction. And so we're assisting people in breaking the addiction to the old paradigm. We're assisting people in seeing through the reporters from the old paradigm called mass media. And podcasts like this, I call this the reporters of the new paradigm. And we're actually reporting from the possible, whereas the old paradigm is reporting from the carcass of a bones of something that's dying. But people are addicted to that. So we have to make the new sexy. We have to make the new sexy and fun and possible. And so I do everything I can to play outside the box to be able to bring the activation behind my words. But I have to bring things in that are fun, that seem foolish at times, in order to grab the attention, so that I can actually deliver the message. We call it putting spinach into the ice cream. Bring the activated energy into it. But I think that's the question we're all grappling with. People are, as you're saying, first of all, they're addicted to the old, and now they become addicted to the new toys. The new technological toys. Oh, I got this. Oh, I got the new iPhone. Oh, I got this, got that. So we have to make consciousness pursuit fun. And I think that's happening because, when you look at the statistics in America, all the young people are leaving the old churches. And they're going into the study of metaphysics. They're going into the study of the law of attraction. They're going into the study of manifestation, which are beginning steps, little small steps into the larger mystical realm, you know. And so, so now the fundamental churches are starting to study this stuff and start to teach it because they want to get their congregation back, you know. And so it's an interesting, you know. Then a lot of those guys are calling me to teach them, but they don't want me to do it in public like Nicodemus. They want to do it at night. they want me to come teach them, but don't tell anybody that you're teaching me, you know. So we're at the point of a crisis, but I see a light. I see it.
Indeed. And it's so important that the technology be used the right way, the right technology. When people sit around at a table, two of them can be, sometimes you see couples sitting at a table, and you would think that they'll be enjoying each other. Instead of them, each is picking up his mobile, the smartphone, and is talking to somebody else, or looking at some film or some video. Now, to what? It's fine if you use your mobile phone, your smartphone to communicate and to get information, but not if you just separate yourself off from the rest. And you can make yourself an enclosed individual just communing with your little gadget, you see. And that's a danger that we have there, that the new technology separates instead of bringing together. And it depends what goes on it. We can have the kind of videos that join people together, that listen to people like Michael Beckwith and Greg Braden and Deepak Chopra and others, you know. And then, of course, we can realize that we are belonging to a wider community, and we can join that community. But technology has to be overcome. It's a means, it's a vehicle. Otherwise, if you're stuck on it just for the love of it, then we get bogged down just playing computer games, basically. That's the danger. You're just playing games by ourselves, you know. It's like playing cards by yourself the old-fashioned way. You just deal for yourself and then you play. So it's a communal game, and we have to use the technologies, use the means that we have to play a community game, to commune with each other, as Michael says. Create a community, a communion among people, and that has to be eventually. It has to spread worldwide. It has to spread to the species. The new person will arise if we are all joining the community of life on Earth. And first of all, a community of human beings, which is not just my country or your country, or my race or your race, or whatever. It's the community of all of us on this earth, being part of this tremendously coherent wholeness, which is nature, which is the web of life on this earth. Joining it instead of separating ourselves off. We can do it, as Michael says, we have the means to do it. So now do it, and Michael can help us do it.
Exactly. Please, Michael.
What we're doing is we're redefining what success is. You know, personal success is when you have your own health together, you have your financial together. You know, but that's personal success. We now, as Ervin is reminding us, we now are expanding our viewpoint of success, and we're including other nations, and we're including the planet. We're not just being nationalistic, you see, or we're not just dealing just our kin. We're coming to understand what Jesus meant when he talked about loving your neighbor. It wasn't the person just living next door to you. The neighborhood is the planet. And so from a very young age, our children need to be taught that everyone is your neighbor and planetary success is the game. That's the game we're playing. We're not playing the game of who he or she who has the most toys wins. We're playing the game of who leaves the best vibrational footprint on the earth. The footprint of beauty, the footprint of love, generosity, compassion, kindness, philanthropy. That's the game that we're now playing. And the danger of the technology, as Ervin is reminding us, I know of a personal case of a woman. I have a friend of mine who had a friend until he discovered that this friend, she works for the armed services, and she was adept at computer games. So now she kills people with drones. You know, she gets a target, she goes into work, she gets her target that are primarily in the Middle East and parts of Africa, and she takes them out. And then she comes home and feeds her kids. And he was talking to her about this, and she had no connection between the fact that she's pushing a button and somebody's dying, that's a human being that just died. And in many cases, it's what you call collateral damage. Other people are being killed as well, not just the target that they're going after. But she was so cut off from the fact that she actually kills human beings for a living. In her mind, she's just on this computer and following orders to kill these people. That's dangerous. I mean, that's where people are being led to, not just distraction, but actually extraction of human life, you know. So to Ervin's point, you know, we have to really shine the light on this kind of thing and begin as a species. On a positive note, I have an individual go through my classes, and he was a part of the war industry. And after the first year of being with me, he quit. He quit his job. He said, I can't be a part of this industry, you know, because he was also like blinders on. He was a computer whiz, and he was doing things and that led to people's deaths. And he woke up and said, I can't be a part of the system, you know. So there's a lot of people waking up. There's a lot of people still sleeping. But I see there's a trend towards awakening. There's a trend, you see. And I mean, Ervin said it all, you know, this separation that's caused by technology. And what you said earlier, we have to make this thing sexy. We have to make consciousness expanding sexy. And I often teach that even in businesses, we have to have a minimum of 4 bottom lines. You know, in the old days, you had one bottom line, that was profit. You know, now you have to have planet, people, and purpose that leads to a profit. You know, you have to, how is this helping the planet? How is this sustaining the planet? How is this business not hurting the planet? And then how are we taking care of our people? The people that gets the end product and also the people that work for you. How are we taking care of people? You know, and what is our higher purpose for the business? It can't just be making money. That's old. It has to be alleviating some kind of suffering, bringing some kind of joy, some kind of beauty, some kind of efficacy. You know, it has to have a higher purpose. And then there's profit, because you have to sustain yourself. But any business that's trying to come into manifestation at this time in human history that's solely for money, it will not succeed in the new paradigm.
What purpose? Yes, the purpose. The old-fashioned purpose, the old purpose, yeah, which is so dysfunctional, is just to play a game that separates from the reality. I remember once somebody asked the retiring head of General Electric, what motivated you? You made it a very successful company. What was it that you really wanted to achieve? And he offered one word: win. You just want to win. You're playing games. You want to win. You see, the winning means getting more power, more market share, more profit, you know, more power altogether. And this reminded me also of another example. I once happened to know, became a good friends with a philosopher who in his youth, when he was 18 years old and 19 years old, he was German, and he was a Stuka pilot, you know, these dive bombers, you know, the incredible what they could produce by diving down and letting down go their bombs. I asked him, did you know that you're actually killing people with the bombs? It never occurred to them. You had to get that bomb into the target, you know. Even more important than getting the target, to shooting down the so-called enemy, the British planes, the British Spitfires, I think they were called at the time. So they played games. Who can shoot down how many? When you were 18 and 19 years old, this was an exciting game. Never occurred to them that they are killing people. It was their job. They are winning also. They are playing a different game. And nowadays, if you just want to win by playing computer games, it's just as dangerous a kind of a thing. At least you are not actually killing people, but as you say, we're killing the effigy, the sort of the representation of people. So let's play games, which is the real world, how to be a productive part of the web of life on the planet, how to be a part of evolution and a part of the positive aspect, not part of the problem. You see, so if you can get this mentality, recognizing that the playing field is the earth, is life on this part of the universe, that I think then we start playing games that can get us someplace instead of just hurting each other.
Right. Rival games. Yes.
Why aren't there there are genius minds out there creating apps and games? We have the Olympics. Maybe we need an infusion of new apps and games to transition us so that in other words, one of my questions is actually, in order to birth this new paradigm, is it necessary to make an actual cut, or is it an alchemical shift that we're taking some of the old as we bring it into the new? And can we use our creative genius to create apps and games and a sort of a new kind of Olympics where the global body suddenly starts to understand that it has an arm and a leg, and each part of the body is maybe doing a wonderful competition on behalf of the whole, just to sort of stimulate and wake ourselves up in the most fun, as we say, sexy, uplifting way, sort of a seductive dance as we enter this new paradigm. What do you both think?
Alison, what you are saying calls to mind the saying, we have to remember who we are. Remember. Also a literal word.
I think that we're in the beginning stages of that there are individuals like the Global Citizen group that was created. I think I spoke in South Africa pre-COVID, and we raised billions of dollars in one day. That is people can now submit and get grants. They have to submit a proposal for how they're going to help change the earth for the better. It can be in environment, it can be in social justice, it can be in education. So those kind of things are emerging. So we need more of that, those kind of, not festivals, those kind of challenges, those kind of Olympics, so that people can actually funnel their genius into solving the issues of the day. Rather and think beyond, their market share for their particular business, but to think the planet. And I think we're at the beginning stages of that kind of thought. It just needs to be more fueled. I mean, it was just a small little bit of a news item on the old Paradigm News, even though I think that day was raised $7 billion in one week. $7 billion.
Was this Hugh Evans, the Global Citizen Festival? Is that what you're referring to? Because there was a global live stream.
Yeah, there's live stream all over. Yeah, it's that one.
Exactly.
I was there. It was Oprah, and it was Jay-Z and Beyonce, and there's a bunch of us. They had me open it up. Right. And I didn't find out until weeks later they'd raised that much money. And so that's the beginning of that. And there's other things like that happening. But it gets very little play in the mainstream media. So we have to begin to figure out ways to really get the message out that these things are happening and begin to build them. So I always tell
people. In evolutionary theory, we know that it's never the mainstream that evolves. The mainstream dies off. Yes. Preferably sooner rather than later. Yes. The evolution comes from the periphery, comes from the bottom, and then it has to move in toward the center, move up, if you like. Yes. So I think that's where the reaction responses, that's where the creativity is occurring. And that's what we have to look at and further and promote, so that the new culture will arise, which is already arising, will become powerful enough to take over.
Yeah.
That is our job.
And I tell people the same thing, that nothing creative is really going to come from your political system. The politicians are embedded within the old paradigm. You may have a sprinkling of a couple that are statesmen and stateswomen, but pretty much not. It's going to come outside of that. Self-governance, having a vision, walking in that direction, and self-empowerment, you see. And all of this is in alignment with expanding our consciousness of our oneness with the presence. Absolutely. Yeah.
And some leading politicians realize this. I'm reminded now that I wrote about 15, 20 years ago, a little book called You Can Change the World. And the foreword was written by another Mikhail Gorbachev. And in the foreword he said, never think of the politician as going to lead the way. And he was a politician.
Right.
But he knows what games they are playing, you see. You always look to the people to lead the way. And honest people recognize this and know this. Yeah. But we just have to realize all of it and empower the creative alternatives at the periphery so that they become the new mainstream.
That's it. It'll die.
I think we have reached a point here where we can conclude, so there's a couple of words. I would just like to say to Michael that it has been a great pleasure to have you with us and to have discussed on these points which are so critical, not just for our happiness, but for our very existence on this planet, to recognize that we are at this tipping point and that a new spirituality, a lived spirituality, can arise, which can show us the way. It's not the old-fashioned dogma, it's the new feeling, it's the new sense of who we are and what the world is. The kind of things that you are leading, Michael, and that we need so much in the world. So thanks again, and thanks to Alison again for moderating this discussion.
Well,
Ervin, thanks you. I would travel the world. I would to work with you, Ervin. Come on, you've done so much for humanity. You've made such a gigantic vibrational footprint on this planet. As soon as I saw your name and they said they want you to be on a podcast with Ervin and Alison, I said yes, absolutely.
Maybe we need an Ervin app. Maybe we need an Ervin app. Yes.
No.
A new game.
We need to back this up. Join with the Laszlo app. That's why
Laszlo
we have to join.
You don't have to write anything else. We can just extrapolate it from what you've already written and have something up there.
It's the Laslap. Here's to the Laslap and the spinach in the ice cream that Michael Beckwith is going to help us make so delicious and taste so good. And I think we are going to end on this incredibly uplifting note. I can't wait to get uplifted and eat my spinach with ice cream and then some. So on that very, very inspirational note, I'm Alison Goldwyn with our host, Ervin Laszlo, and Fred Sau, and today's very special guest, Michael Bernard Beckwith, inviting you to join us for more episodes of Dawn of an Era of Well-Being. And consider this, that the holiday season is fast upon us. And it may not feel like a holiday for many people, but this book makes a wonderful gift of uplift. And please remember that the bravado of our ego has historically gotten the better of us. So when building a new paradigm for humankind, let's try to include humankindness. Stay tuned and stay attuned.
Thank you.
And now to conclude our program, here are some thoughts from our co-host, Fred Sau.
And how do we discern the voice, the clever voice of ego versus the subtle voice of consciousness? How do we discern between these two? Where does that guidance come from? And how do we discern the clever voice of ego and the subtle voice of consciousness?
Well, first of all, you have to practice. And then you can differentiate quite easily because there are thoughts, and their thoughts that come from thinking, and their thoughts arise on its own. On different type of thoughts, you'll be able to distinguish them. And then, of course, you cannot see yourself So the best way of seeing yourself is actually when there's a mirror. And that mirror is called relationship. And a particular light of relationship is really good for mirroring. It's called a journey mate. It's called fellowship. It's called sangha. Those are people that are on a journey together that understand that if we journey together collectively, we can go far. We can mirror each other. And it's only through relationship you can see yourself more clearly. Of course, in meditation you see too. But meditation is nothing but your relationship with yourself. So in relationship, we can see ourselves. We can see our ego. We can see the origin. So if you observe your thoughts, then you start tracing back the thoughts. Where does that thought come from? Soon that thought will come out to be a complaint, or soon it will come out with a story. Soon you will see your ignorance, your aversion, your greed at play. And they all come up together. They're not separable. Ignorance, greed, and aversion, pride, all these are intertwined into the same zone. And you can see that thought as you follow that thought in mindfulness practice and hold that investigation. And you'll find out where it came from. Then you investigate it and ask yourself, is that really true? Are you 100% sure your story is true? Why do you think it's so true? Can you prove it? Then you'll find out that all the ego is trying to do is playing games with you. But you keep practicing. You keep practicing. And then you'll find truth. It takes time. It is about attention and intention. Pay attention to your deepest intention, and you can see it.
Thank you for joining us. Dawn of an Era of Well-Being is a co-production of the Laszlo Institute, ITEA Institute, and Select Books. It's produced by Nora Cesar and Kenichi Sugihara, with theme music Chimera by Biba DuPont. The book, Dawn of an Era of Well-Being, co-authored by Ervin, Laszlo, and Frederick Sau, is available wherever books or ebooks are sold. Please subscribe to Dawn of an Era of Well-Being, the podcast, on Apple or Spotify for more fascinating guests and discussion. My name is Alison Goldwyn, founder and creative director of Synchronistery.com, a future party for the planet broadcast live worldwide. Wishing you well-being till we talk again next week.